starting now our afternoon session. Really glad that you're all here again at the main stage. Our next keynote speaker has its own Freedom Act. Das Gesetz für die Arbeitsweise der Bundesagentur für Sprunginnovation und zur Flexibilisierung ihrer rechtlichen und finanziellen Rahmenbedingungen, SPRIND, is his main point of operations. Rafael Laguna de la Vera SPRIND is the director of the Bundesagentur für Sprunginnovation. He is a businessman, a venture capitalist focusing on technology and information, and I think he founded his first startup when he was 16, Elephant Software, really cool. Please visit with a warm welcome, say hello to Rafael Laguna.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. That was a long time ago, as you can see, right? 16, but it was a real company. In a way, I was always driven by one thing, which is sort of being curious about the future. Right? The future is the sort of exciting, uncharted land, and being optimistic for the future is just a lot of fun. Unfortunately, we've lost some of that because we're not being all that optimistic anymore, which is kind of a problem, and I will tell you why, and then I will tell you what we're trying to do so that we change that. Because somebody much smarter than I said, when he was probably younger than I was when I was founding my first company, said, the best way to predict the future is to build it, to make it. Right? And this room is full of people building future. You have a high responsibility for everyone else that may be worried about the future and is not so deeply involved in building futures. Most people just want to live a normal life and be left alone with problems and do their thing, whatever it is. You guys are here because you want to build a future. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here at an AI conference, whatever that is, right? I know we all don't know, but we don't tell them, right? It's something that's kind of cool and that will obviously do something to change the future in a big way. Now, if we believe that to predict the future is the best way is to build it, and we're building it, what's missing? It's a vision of a positive future that we want, right? And if you're opening your social media accounts and you're seeing orange men doing wild things, bald men doing wild things, mostly men doing wild things, it seems, really bad things, all our stable world is changing, and we're reading all this crap from algorithms that we're not controlling, that are feeding us, with things that take away our optimism for the future. Now, that needs to change with good journalism, and we have to reinvent how we do that and how we finance that. That has to change with us by first of all creating a positive future narrative. I have a t-shirt that says pessimism is a waste of time. Now, if you want to sound smarter, you can say Karl Popper once said that optimism is the only viable option. Yeah, it is. I mean, what do you get out of pessimism? A bad day, right? And then the next day is bad again. So, creating narratives and telling them to the world is the first thing that we need to do, especially when you're working in technologies like this. Every technology is like a knife. And the more powerful it becomes, the more powerful a knife it is. Now, you can do different things with knives. And what we're going to do with knives is decided by people like you, and by what you have in your head as your perceived future that you want. So I was telling you I will be unloading a lot of responsibility on you, right? Don't worry, but it's true, because you're the future builders. Now, how do we go about this? Let me give you the example of SPRIND, because I think it's an interesting story, and some of you sort of have shared the experience. Mario, show yourself, please, because you have to come to his presentation at 3, I'm sorry. Mario was helping us get this, bloody law. It took 4 bloody years to get a SPRIND Liberty law so that we can work the way we always wanted to. It took 4 years, but it's democracy, right? It's hard. A lot of people have a say in it, more than should maybe. And then you need, state secretaries that just, ram through, push it through. Thank you very much for that, Mario. Thank you very much. Now he needs a vacation of 5 years or something, I believe, because it's been so hard. Now, what does it all mean, you may ask? I mean, what is SPRIND to begin with? We're the government agency for breakthrough innovation. Somebody said it's like the Ministry of Funny Walks, right, from Monty Python. And in a way it is, as you can see. It is a ministry, and you may ask, why is the ministry even involved in breakthrough innovation? Why a ministry? I mean, well, the answer is, most breakthrough innovation, governments were involved. Because at the very early stages, you need a lot of money. The private sector, more often than not, is not willing to give you that kind of money. All of you being in fundraising know that. Or if all of you being VCs know that, because you are fundraising all the time as well. It's just hard to get money when you have a vision. Now, really big breakthroughs are also very expensive. So, I mean, we're talking about AI gigafactories with 100,000 GH100s or so. I know why NVIDIA is a sponsor, right? That's great, fantastic. But it's billions. It's billions and billions and billions. And so why don't we have them? Well, because nobody is putting down that money from the private sector because we don't have it. So if you want it, you have to put down the money to get it. In the US, of course, always being a little faster with this stuff, in 1958, after the Sputnik shock, after a little metal ball was flying around the world, I think 2 or 3 times, sending down beeps. That was all. President Eisenhower realized, oops, the Soviet Union is ahead of us in the space curve, and who owns space, just like AI, who owns space will own the world. Who owns AI will own the world. Same thing. So he said, obviously our ministries, have fallen behind. Our policies have not led to us being the leaders in these technologies. And so he founded NASA, which you all know. Moon program following successfully, spawning off tons of technologies that we wear in our pockets and elsewhere, and an agency called ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, later renamed to DARPA, defense. It's pretty much what we do now, right? Now everything is defense, right? They did that also somewhere down there. And they freed them from the normal shackles on how ministries have to work. And that was the idea of SPRIND. Now, Angela Merkel decided, I want one in 2017. And then 2 years, nothing happened. And then an Arbeitskreis was started, right? And I was called in to help designing SPRIND, this agency, Sprung Innovation Deutschland. That's what SPRIND means. And I thought, what a funny name, Sprung Innovation. Never heard, but it sounds like fun. And of course, building something that's truly supporting innovators. In a fast way that love them, that are friends of these innovators, and not people sending forms that you have to fill in, 400 pages and stuff. Sounded like a really good idea, because other than Eisenhower in '58, we have very good basic research. And some of you come from basic research in AI. We've been doing that for decades. Right? Unfortunately, the companies are not here, so there is a gap between basic research and unicorns. Germany writes half the patents that the US writes, but we only have 1/4 of the people. So per capita, we're writing twice the patents. That kind of speaks to our basic research. And researchers hate writing patents, you know that, right? Specifically basic researchers don't like doing that very much because it's just work. They want to publish papers in Nature, right? That's what they do. Well, anyway, we still write twice as much patents as the US, but at the end, we only have 1/20 of the unicorns. So somewhere on this way, we're losing it. And all of you entrepreneurs know that after a while, you probably get seed funding here, you get a Series A here, 20 million. Some get 100 million, or if your name is Jonas, you get 300 million. Right? But that's about it, right? It's very hard to sort of get the later stage funding, and it's super hard to do an IPO here. Even if you're successful here, like BioNTech, you're doing an IPO at NASDAQ. So you can see, okay, there's a problem. And it always ends in a trade sale when you should be doing a Series B, when you start scaling. And 80% of the trade sales above a valuation of 25 million go where? Outside Europe. That's where our unicorns go to die. And this is what we need to fix. it's a threat to democracy. Because if we are not creating the industries for the next decades, we'll be having more people voting the wrong stuff. And democracy will go to die. And it's not far out. You can see that. So SPRIND's mission, very simply put, is to make sure we have more unicorns. So we went out and said, okay, what's the problem? And we found out the first big problem is administration. Because we've been burdened with an administrational load like a ministry. Even though Angela Merkel and her cabinet decided to make SPRIND totally free of everything. You know, we get a budget over the next decade of $1 billion. You don't have to adhere to the Bundeshaushaltsordnung, to the Besserstellungsverbot and all this super compound nouns that they invent. Unfortunately, within those 2 years where nothing happened, the ministries had enough time to kill all of that. And none of the freedoms were there when I came in 2019 and was asked to help build this agency. And then they talked me into taking the job. I was running my own company at the time with 300 people and all that, but I said, I'm 55, I've been to Harvard, I learned time to give back is a good thing to do. If you're that old and you have enough money, you don't need more money. I mean, how many schnitzel can you eat, right? And so I said, okay, let's try that. I thought I had the freedoms that were in this original document. What I did not know is that they had all changed to something that couldn't operate the way we wanted to. And then the next 4 years, as part of my normal job, which was funding innovators, I also had to invent myself and eventually come up with a SPRIND liberty law that Mario helped bringing into the world. It took 4 years. And now we have it. Actually, when I was asked to sign my contract for another 4 years, I said I sign for 1 year and then maybe extend for another 3 if I get this law. The law was signed on December 30th of that year. Right, so a little bit of pressure helps, right, to get it to where we are. But now, what we are now, and that's the good message, we are a very unique government agency that does not exist in the world in the same way. Because we can do funding tools that governments usually have. So we give you, for example, I'll explain how that works in a second. But also funding tools that private venture usually does. And we can co-invest with private venture. So at the early stages of an innovation, when there is no private capital, we just give you money. I'm sorry, do it. But please deliver results. We have a lot of trust in our innovators because innovators want to make their thing work. Right? And the only thing that we check is, are they making progress? And if they're sort of changing path, which happens a lot too, we're saying, okay, is it still a leapfrog innovation? Is it still breakthrough? Is it still disruptive? If the answer is yes, we say go. If the answer is no, we say stop. No more money. Not only money is important. Innovators, there are some types that are business people and technical people at the same time that have a lot of social competency, that can speak well on stage and blah, blah, blah. But let me tell you, this is very rare. So you need to find a team. And they don't show up with complete teams, so we help them complete their teams. We train them how to pitch. We train them how to read a cap table and all these things, because mostly technical innovators don't know, right? Because eventually they need to pitch in front of private investors. So we make them bankable. We give them all the money they need to continue developing. We give it to them very quickly. Because, who of you has ever applied for government funding for your venture? Did you like it? Was it fast? How was the documentation task? Wonderful, right? So that needs to change. Because we don't, it's kind of crazy when you think, right? Tina Klüver, I think she already talked. She's a director general at the Ministry of Science and these other things that they've now put there. She said, if I would need to set up a program for something, right? Let's say AI gigafactories. I have to make a call for a Projektträger. That's an government organization, near government organization that puts these things to work. But this call takes 6 months, 12 months or so, because there are several of them, and you have to be fair and what have you. So then you select one of those, and then you say, please develop this program. It takes 6 months. Program comes back. The politicians, minister decides, yeah, that's what we're going to do. What's next? You make a call for a Projektträger that now executes this call. So now you have one, another 6 months or so. You give it to them, they make the call, they tell the world, please apply. And they tell you, and stop working on your thing, because that's against the funding rules that we have. You cannot start working on your thing. It will break your application. You won't get money. So you go pause, and then you wait for the Projektträger to evaluate your work. You may be talking to dozens of smart people, and eventually they pick you, and they say, yep, it's you. It takes another 3 months before you get the first monies, and then 3 months later, you have to send documentation on how you spent the money. Right? We're talking years before you have the money, and the administrative burden that you have is, I don't know what, 20, 30%. If you're a prof, it's probably 80% to do all this documentation. It's crazy. And this is money to fund these people, to make them faster. So we said, okay, speed, right? Speed, simplicity. How can you achieve that? Instead of mistrusting our innovators, that they buy the wrong pencils and go at the wrong conferences, we say you do what you want, as long as you achieve the goal you promised to us. We were looking for those goals in shorter cycles. We don't give you money for 3 or 5 years, but maybe for 6 months or a year or so. And maybe we not only give you money, but maybe some of your competitors out there that may use different technologies. We don't tell you what technologies you're using. We want you to achieve the goals. Right? And if you don't deliver the results and you cannot explain to us why, then you're not getting the additional funding, and that's the end of the story. Right? And we don't count pencils because we don't care. If you're drinking champagne all the time and you're reaching this goal, have our money. Doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I tried, but it not for long at least, right? You feel good for a while and then, well, then you die. So we do this in 2 ways. One is what we call challenges, where we say, hey, we need a solution to one of those big questions of our time. So how about getting rid of virus infections? Guess when we started that? It was our first challenge in 21 in the middle of Corona. With this whole everything Corona happened because we did not have a medication against this virus, right? Which, well, when you talk to experts, many said, well, it's very complicated, they mutate all the time and what have you. Yeah, things are complicated. I mean, HIV virus is complicated, and we thought we were never going to solve it, and we solved it, right? So that's what innovators do. Hey, right? Impossible stuff. That's what I want to do. So we started the broadband antiviral challenge. And I give this one example, then I tell you a few more that we made, which said, find a solution. One that is quickly adaptable to mutations. Time to market is critical for these things. Best is broadband, works for all viruses. That's probably unrealistic without modification. But anyway, something that's faster than what we have now. Because we had calculated Corona pandemic, if we had had a vaccine or a medication against the virus within the first 100 days, more or less nothing would have happened, because it hadn't spread at the time very much. So we would have saved trillions, and a lot of people wouldn't have died. And we wouldn't have to lock our children away, our teenagers at home, which is even worse, I think, than most of the other effects that this had. So we would say, oh, that's a goal to have, right? We put down 35 million, which is not a whole lot for a government funding program. We made the call. The call lasts for 8 weeks. Gives you time to write down your proposal. You send it in 5 minutes before midnight, everyone, which is true, by the way. We had like 2 applications until 11:30 at night, and then we had 47 at midnight. And we were sitting there like, nobody cares, right? Which wouldn't have been great. Then we looked at these things for 2 weeks with our jury, which was external experts, very diverse, from venture capital, from science, from all sort of walks of life, to evaluate the best proposals. We invited 20 teams. They showed up for 2 days, crunch time, pitches, ding, 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 and we selected 9 teams. And they got 700K for the first year each. They sent an invoice The contract is 14 pages. The contract is published with a call, so you know what you're signing. It's called pre-commercial procurement. It's an order. So we place an order. If you're a startup, it's revenues. We don't show up on your cap table. Right? It's revenues. Investors like revenues. You send the bill, you get the money 3 days later. So the time to money from you applying at 5 before midnight to your bank account is something like 14 or 21 days for this. Right? The second thing that we do is project proposals. Anytime, 24/7, 365, you send us your pitch deck and documentation about your project. It needs to have sort of a TRL of at least 3, meaning no basic science, because that's well funded in Germany. Right, with Max Planck and all these guys in the universities, I think we're doing well if you look at the money we're putting in there. But now we want to make it applied science. We want to get it out of the world. So if you're at this stage where science funding ends, or your garage budget, it doesn't need to be science. It can be in your garage, whatever you want. It can be you, single person, doing that. We don't care. You don't have to be förderfähig. Everyone is förderfähig with a good idea. Right? Compound nouns, I tell you. Lots of them. Now, we send the proposal. If we like what we see, we'll ask you a few questions and give you money for answering them. We call that validation contract. It's up to 200K. It's not super much money, but it carries you a couple of weeks. So opposite of what the other funding instruments do is we say, keep on running. Right? But help us evaluate more. So this is a paid due diligence, if you like, that helps you continue the work on your project. And also to get to know each other, to help you build a team, to connect you to important people from government, science, what have you, because that's one of the perks of being a federal government agency. Everybody talks to you and even feels good about it. Because we're not the IRS, right? We're not so we're kind of liked, which is good because we need all these experts, all of you, out there to help us evaluate the project and help the project push forward. So now if we like what we see, we now have, thanks to SPRIND Liberty Law, several means. We can, if you're founding a new company, it's not older than 5 years, we can give you up to 1 million in form of a Zuwendung. That's a grant. Now, if that makes you bankable, we can co-invest with private sector up to 70% of the round. Only limited by our budget, so there is no number that limits us. It's not 1 million and we can do 5, we can do 50, and we've done 50. So that whatever it takes. Now, if you're not bankable yet, we can continue with grants. And that can be, if it's early technology, up to 35 million from us. But you need a small percentage, 25% sort of private contribution, which can be many things. It can be money, but it can be work, whatever. Right, that carries you across this 25% bump. Of course, with the goal to make you bankable, make you financeable. And then we can come on with these instruments. So eventually our money also gets a share of the company and potentially generates a return, but we're not focusing on returns. We're focusing on return on another compound noun, Volkswirtschaft, right? On what the overall economic impact is of this thing that we're doing. Because we're spending tax money. We've built the agency now from 0 in 2020 to 250 million in this year. We've even been growing in this year, which not a lot of government agency can say, because as you might know, we didn't have a government for quite some time. We didn't have a budget for this year. This is now all changing. And the third thing that we do is because we're being exposed to all these technologies, we're running all these projects. We've seen 2,500 projects. We've launched 11 challenges. One call is open, by the way. It's the autonomous flight challenge. It's the second time we try this. The first time we were in Erding. We had an obstacle course, with fog and rain and all these complicated things. And flying things, mostly called drones, had to find their way to a box and bring it back without global navigation systems. Right? So edge AI on the drone. Nobody made it. I mean, one team made it back, actually, but without the box. So we said, okay, give it a year, and then we try again, and that's what we're doing. This call is open. If you go to our website, SPRIND.org, call runs for 6 weeks or so, and then you know what the process is. 2 weeks later, you will have your money. And can go. And then we'll try again and see what happens. It's kind of the real fun stuff, because that's a real competition at the very end, you can imagine. We funded another 200 projects from the project funding. The amounts are sometimes very low, and then they get private funding, and we go out. We're crowding in, not out. So if there's private money enough, the private sector gets to finance these projects. And some we had to put down like 45 million for a laser or 80 million for a clinical phase 2 for an Alzheimer's medication and things like that. You find all these on our website, in our podcast. This is where the innovators talk, which is also very interesting. Have a listen to that. Now comes AI. And now what should government do to bring AI forward? Of course, we're lucky enough to talk to many of you and many others to develop a strategy. And we put down these strategies on paper and we give it to the governments, to our government. And if you look at the coalition agreement, you will find a lot of topics that we're working on, like fusion energy or AI, obviously, and all these other things in the coalition agreement. Now, the big question is, will we operate the same way we've done before, sort of the slow way? Or do we do it the fast way this time? Do we leapfrog or do we follow? So for example, if you read our AI strategy, which you find on our website, just Google SPRIND and AI and you find the document, it will say, well, GPUs are great and we need them now, but we should use them to build new model architectures and support new data modalities. We should invent compound compute, so to speak. How can we distribute? How can we keep data locally but still train a model? Johannes launched this. Johannes? He's the man with the money, right? He's Mr. AI at SPRIND. The Compound Learning Challenge is running already, so people already have their money. We have 7 very promising teams that will free us from the shackles of having to have 100,000 GPUs in one data center, even having to have GPUs to begin with. Because the other thing that we want to invest in, aside from other algorithms, is new computing architectures. You know, we're doing compute like John von Neumann invented 80 years ago. And building nuclear power plants next to data centers is just not a very good idea, especially in Germany because we don't build them anymore. It will take 15 years or so to build a fusion power plant, but that is crazy. I mean, to build one brain that consumes the energy of a nuclear power plant is probably not the pinnacle of this technology. We're very early. And of course, one way to fix it is better algorithms. That's one challenge. And the other way to fix it is build better hardware, post von Neumann. And we will be launching such a challenge. We already did an architectural challenge for this. We will be opening a challenge where we want teams that build new algorithms on the one side and that build new hardware on the other. And we want to buy systems at the end of it. It will include quantum computers. But that's just one post-von Neumann architecture. It's one special analog computer. There's so many others out there. You know, there's analog computers, which we like a lot, including quantum computers. I'm not sure they will work eventually, but that's how it is. But then there is neuromorphic computing, in-memory computing, optical computing, even reservoir computing, which is biological computing. And these things have a lot of advantages when it, for example, comes to power consumption, right? And so we need to bring down the power that these things need. We need to bring down the size of the data center. We probably need to get it down to a fingernail. DARPA brought the GPS receivers from boxes like this down to a fingernail. That's now in your phone. We wouldn't have smartphones without DARPA because they just sized these things down, and we have to do the same. We have to bring the power that's now running in a data center with 100,000 GH100s onto a fingernail. Now that sounds crazy, right? And it's probably not next year, but it will be in a couple of years, and I'm sure we can get there. That's a future that I can imagine. And then we build solutions for the people, right, that make our lives better, because that's much more satisfying than building things that make life worse or make very few people very rich. That's not what our humanistic foundation is. So begin with creating this narrative in your head. What's the positive narrative for a future that I want? And second, what can I do to get to this future? And if it's a cool idea, please come to us. Thank you very much.
I think you spoke for them. I found it very interesting. We said who did government funding, who tried to accept government funding. All the hands were had a little bit of group therapy session. so everyone in the same.
That's required afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Talk to my therapeutic about it. I want to ask you one thing. I think what is really, I think, also important in your job, I heard what really helped me in life is that happiness is the right management of expectations. Yeah. So how do you manage expectations, especially in something like Sprung Innovation, where perhaps the expectations are very, very high in doing something revolutionary and things like that? How is there a right management of expectation for the things that you or the companies develop in your...
I think we simply have to be honest with what we do. So I say a lot I don't know. So when I was in an audition, how's it called, in an Ausschusssitzung in the Bundestag. So when are we going to have our first fusion power plant? And my answer was, you know, if you would have asked the experts, the AI experts, most of them, not all of them, I know, there's one or two that would have said differently. When do we have really useful AI tools for everyone in the world? Yeah. You would have gotten very different answers. Yeah. Right? Between, say, 2 years and never. Right? Yeah. That is what the experts would have said. Right? So now you're asking an expert on fusion, and I can tell you this, it's not going to be 2 weeks. Yes. So I said 15 years in my presentation, plus minus 5 years, because that sounds kind of right. But if it's 25 years or 10, so what? You know, the thing is, free energy in abundance, too cheap to meter, everywhere available, fully green, will solve a lot of mankind's problems. We will have, climate change will be much more controllable. We have clean water. We even have food and many other things. We will defossilize in no time if we have that. So the impact of this is big enough, and this is what we're making high hopes for. And if we get there 10 years later, so what? Right?
Yeah, I get that. But don't you think that all this predicting, I get you always also get the question, how will AI be in 10 years and in 5 years and stuff like that? My response is I'm a general manager, not an astrologer. Yeah, this is my answer to that. How do you manage this kind of prediction economy?
But I'm saying, like what I said at the intro, if we don't try it, it will never come. Yeah. If it would be sort of putable in a spreadsheet where a number would come out and it would say 42, right? Then well, yeah, it probably wouldn't need me, right? Because then anybody can finance this. There are lots of uncertainties in these things, right? And we have to live with those. We have what we call a serendipity culture at SPRIND. We just allow for these happy accidents, so to speak, and a lot of us are only here because of happy accidents. You know that, right?
Okay. Well, it was not a happy accident that he was on stage. Thank you so much, Rafael Laguna.
It was a pleasure. Thank you,
my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.